Another week, Your Grace, Archbishop of Sydney, Anthony Fisher. Welcome to the Against the Grain podcast, where father and son talk faith and footy. So you've been introduced already to Anthony, the spiritual son. Behind the camera, we've got the Catholic wizard, Anthony Costa, who is able to do anything technologically. He makes us look $1 million every week. We've got our socials queen, Sarah. She looks after all of our social media. So this is our nice little family and the podcast that's been running nearly for a year now. So thank you for being on the show. We know you're very busy. We're very appreciative of the generosity you've shown us.
A quick thank you again to our show sponsor, MJ Podiatry. To remind everyone at home, they're a mobile home visit network servicing all throughout Sydney, an all-round podiatry service handing out general treatments, anything for sport as well, and they do offer NDIS and home care packaging too. For any pains, injuries, custom-made orthotics, advice on footwear, anything you need, as always, MJ Podiatry have your back and they have your feet. So contact the team at 0412 389 278 or email them at info@mjpodiatry.com.au. And now back to the episode.
We're going to get into a few things, but I need to ask the most important thing first. Now, we go through the history of sport, okay? We've got Michael Jordan, arguably the best NBA player ever to have played the game. You've got someone like Stephen Bradbury, who fluked a gold medal at the Winter Olympics. You've got Muhammad Ali, synonymous with boxing. Diego Maradona, the hand of God, one of the greatest soccer players ever. And then you've got Anthony Colin Fisher. Talk to us about that moment of sporting glory that not a lot of the world knows about, but you got to share it with us today, please.
I guess you're referring to my try. I was in the 10th 15 of St Ignatius Riverview, playing against the 10th 15 of St Joseph's College. I was prop and the scrum collapsed, and when they peeled us all off one after another, there I was somehow over the line on top of the ball. And so a try was awarded, and that was my moment of glory.
There it is. There it is. I love
Awesome.
it. I love it.
There's got to be a crowd sound effect or something on that.
In general, I'd say I'm better at spiritual exercises than physical ones,
Yes.
Father Ben. But there we go.
Indeed. But no, you're an active person. You're running around all the time. I know you love playing tennis in some of your off time, and you love going on your walks, and you're training quite often. So we've got a fit bishop in the Archdiocese of Sydney.
Well, when I was appointed as Archbishop in 2014, I announced to people that I was expected to go through to 2035, as long as I didn't die in the meantime or go mad. And so if they're to keep me alive that long to do the job, I've got to keep myself fit.
And thank God you've got your health and you're moving forward, and the Archdiocese of Sydney is in pretty good nick at the moment. We've had some ordinations, we've got things happening, it's an exciting time. But before we get into all of that, we've obviously got a very different audience. Our audience are people of faith, and so they've come to know us over the year we've been online. But also we've got a very unique audience, people that love sport. So not necessarily your churchgoers all the time, and we've been bringing them along on a journey as we go on this podcast. So if you can, just a brief bio of the upbringing and how you came to want to become or give your life to God, and where you're up to today.
Okay, I grew up in a fairly normal Sydney Catholic family. We went to Mass on Sunday, which in those days was normal, but I wouldn't say we were hyper-religious. We went to Catholic schools. At one stage, I wasn't going to be going to a Catholic school any longer because my school kicked the boys out at year 4. That's what they used to do in the convent schools, the primary schools. And my parents didn't know that, and so they hadn't booked me into any other school. So they came to me and said, look, we're going to have to send you to the local state school. And there I was, aged 9, so committed to Catholic education that I told Mum and Dad I was running away from home. I would deliberately fail all my subjects. So in the end, they found a school for me. I had to get 3 buses to get there, an hour and a half each way, which for by then 10-year-old boy, that was quite a thing. But I loved my Catholic schools. I went to 4 different ones at different times because we moved at one stage. I would say that as in my late teens, I was like a lot of teenagers. I certainly called myself Catholic and I kept going to Mass. And I had been thinking of my vocation from when I was about 15, I think. But I don't know, I wasn't terribly serious about it. I decided I should grow up a lot before I made up my mind, and so I went to uni, I travelled, I had a good social life, I worked as a lawyer for a time. But that little idea in the back of my head wouldn't go away, that maybe the place I'd be happiest and where I would best serve God and humanity would be as a priest. It wouldn't go away. In the end, I took leave from my job to go backpacking to make up my mind, and that's where I decided, yes, I should give it a go. And I joined the Dominicans, which if those of you who are seeing me on this show, I'm in my Dominican habit. I'm still a Dominican today. That's where I studied to be a priest. I was ordained a priest in 1991. So I've been a priest now for 33 years. It's longer than you've been alive, Father Ben, isn't it?
Oh, you flatter me. You flatter me. You flatter me.
And I have loved being a priest. I really think the priesthood is a wonderful life. I explain to children when they ask me why did I become a priest, I said they're close to God and they're close to people and they bring God and people closer to each other, and I can't think of a better way to spend your life than that. Now then, a terrible thing happened to me in 2003 when the Pope, at that stage it was Pope John Paul, decided that I should be a bishop. And it wasn't a matter of putting in your CV because you're looking for a promotion. I just got a phone call telling me I had been appointed. Thank you very much. And 2010, it was Pope Benedict's turn, and he sent the message that I was to be Bishop of Parramatta. And then 2014, it was Pope Francis' turn to appoint me as Archbishop of Sydney. So 3 popes have stolen my priestly life from me and my life as a Dominican friar to serve in a different way. But there are many, many consolations in being a bishop too, even if it's not the life I would have chosen for myself.
That's a very unique thing to our audience at home, because we walk around with so much autonomy. We decide what we want to be doing in life. So when you get a phone call saying we're going to elevate you to the rank of bishop, what's going through your mind when all that happens?
Very mixed emotions. There were many tears in those days. I knew I was losing a lot. I was losing my life as a Dominican. That time I was in charge of the students in formation and I loved that work. I was also teaching in a university and I loved that work. And I knew that was gone. It was very disorienting because it just came out of the blue like that. But, you know, the day I entered, really, it's certainly the day I took my vows, and then the day when I lay there before the altar to be ordained a priest, I was saying to God with all my heart, whatever you want, I'll do my best. I'll give you my best. I probably won't always get it right and I'll need a lot of your help. But I'll give it a go. So really, once I was told that's what God, through the church, had asked of me, it was straightforward, really. You just get on with it and do it. And I think, in fact, though it's a very autonomous world and everyone wants to get their own way, and a lot of people think that self-sacrifice is a bad thing. In fact, a good life for anyone is a life where there are twists and turns and many things you never expected or are not exactly on your terms. And sometimes they're very hard things and they do require some sacrifice of your will, of your preferences. But actually, if you let go and let God, if you let him lead you and depend on his grace to do it, you'll often find by the end that was the best way. Whereas doing it my way would not have been the best way. It would have been various temporary pleasures, but it would not have been. So, couples that have kind of got some great plan for themselves and suddenly a kid comes along and it was not what they expected or they wanted, what they planned. You don't have to ask yourself, will we accept this kid or not? You've already made that decision years ago when you decided to give yourselves to God and each other in marriage, and that whatever came, you would do your best. And most couples find in the end that was great. That child was great. That change in their life, it took a lot of sacrifice, took a lot of change, but every bit of it was worth it.
So when you get that phone call, you're not saying, give me a few months to think about it, I'll get back to you. It's basically they expect a yes, because this notion of obedience is not something a lot of people can grasp, or you would give your life completely and almost have no control. So it was almost the expectation is, yes, you'll take this.
That is very much the expectation, and I think it should be the expectation. I think it should be a very rare person that says no to a call from the Pope's ambassador in Australia to be a bishop. Okay, you might know that you're actually dying of cancer. No one else knows. You might know that you've lost your faith. You might know that there's some terrible secret in your past. So, okay, you might have a grave reason that would be grave enough that for the sake of the church and the protection of God's name, you'd say no. But I think it's got to be something as severe as that. I think otherwise it can't be just that's not what I planned for myself. That's not what I'd like. Now, the church has discerned. It's gone through quite a process to pick you. It's asking you to do this thing, a hard thing, but a necessary thing. And it could not function unless some people stood up for leadership in the church. I think if you think of a lot of people that go into teaching, they love the look on the kids' faces when the lights turn on and they understand something. And it is such a consolation for a teacher. But some of those teachers have to accept being appointed principal, and they'll probably never teach again. And that's a loss of a big part of their vocation, of what drew them into teaching. But you couldn't have schools and have teachers unless you had someone willing to lead them as principal. So again, I think part of saying yes to that profession in life is saying yes to where it might take you and being willing to go with that by God's grace.
Well, we're glad you said yes, because thanks be to God, by his grace, the Archdiocese of Sydney is doing very well. And you're our shepherd, you're our leader in the church, and you've got eyes and ears across all things. And so we thought it might be a good opportunity. We've got a married man with 2 beautiful daughters. We've got Sarah, who's discerning her vocation. Anthony and Sarah are dating at the moment. They're discerning their vocation together. Sarah is a high school teacher in Sydney Catholic schools. Anthony's a budding journalist, and you've got a priest in the room. So we thought we'd compile some questions that we might ask you just for a little bit of insight, a little bit of wisdom, and we might just have a conversation around those for the rest of the show. How does that sound?
Sure.
Awesome. And I just want to thank you again, Your Grace, for coming on and answering these questions that we all have. The first of which is, obviously you are very much still a human being. And some people might not be aware that in 2015 you were diagnosed with, I might mispronounce this, Guillain-Barré syndrome, something like that. You'll probably fix that up for me.
Mm-hmm.
And you needed intensive care and rehabilitation. So how has that experience of such physical suffering shaped you as a Catholic leader, and how has it impacted your spiritual life?
Well, it was very shocking when it happened. It was completely out of the blue. I'd only been Archbishop a year, and I felt unwell in the lead up to Christmas. Doctors tried their best to make me right for Christmas. And then on Boxing Day, I woke up and my arms weren't working. And within a few hours, I was totally paralysed from the neck down and in terrible pain and in intensive care in St Vincent's Hospital. Guillain-Barré syndrome is an autoimmune condition. Basically, my immune system tried to kill my nervous system and set about killing especially all the peripheral nerves, the nerves to the feet and the hands. But it also affects your breathing, and so if you're not near a hospital, you could die from it if you get a severe case of it. But it's very rare, and they don't know for sure what caused it. In my case, to happen, but it meant I was totally paralysed. I lost the use of all my muscles, and I spent 5 months in hospital learning all over again how to walk, how to hold things with my hands. I was like a baby having to learn everything, and in the meantime having to have other people do everything for me. And that included embarrassing things that you don't want anyone else to have to do for you. I remember biting a friend's hand when he was trying to feed me a hamburger. And I remember the embarrassment of having to have a nurse wipe my bum for me because I couldn't do anything. So it was humiliating time, a painful time, a time of tremendous weakness. But strangely, I'd have to say it was a grace time too. And I don't want to romanticize it. I would not have wished that on myself. I would never wish that on anybody else. So I'm not going to pretend, look, there are lots of graces, so that forget all the downsides. No, it was a very, very hard time to go through. But I had thousands of people praying for me. I had children, whole schools of children writing prayers and drawings and sending them to the hospital for me, and thousands of adults. I remember when I had they just got me to stand. I couldn't walk yet, but they got me to stand, and there was a group of young adults in the park just opposite the hospital. I could look out the window and there they were singing and praying for me. And I had so many people that were beautiful in their faith, in their prayer for me, and in their love. They cared about me while I was sick. And, that taught me some things about people and about what I needed. I asked people to pray that I might have courage and patience and hope, and I think I did have. I learnt a lot. I learnt a lot about the life of disabled people because I was very severely disabled. Even towards the end of my hospital time, and when I came home I was still in a wheelchair, still needed a nurse and physio to come to me to help me get through a day. And so now I notice when buildings have very poor access or there's no parking for the disabled. I notice that because I was one of them once. I met in the rehab hospital people with multiple sclerosis, strokes, other conditions. I was getting gradually better. they were going downhill, many of them. And yet the human spirit of some of those people was so impressive, how they were determined to get everything out of whatever they had left to work. Now, some were demoralised and they'd given up. And it was very sad, but you could see it was just going to go downhill quickly for them. But others, they were determined if they could still walk, they would walk. And if they had to crawl, they would crawl. But they were great examples of the determination of the human spirit. You talk about sportsmen here. Well, these had all the determination, the commitment, the grit, perseverance of an Olympian, and to see that was also very, very educational for me. I think that I've got to be like that in the spiritual sphere, not so much in the athletic sphere, but I've got to be just as determined, have just as much grit, and not be deflected by my own weaknesses or by other things going on around me.
I remember it was my first year of seminary, and my classmates came to visit you at rehab. And I think at the time there was some kind of wheelchair that would help elevate you, or it would assist you, and there was still limited movement. And I walked in not having had many experiences with people that are suffering. And I walked in and I thought to myself, this is the Archbishop of Sydney. And I've just started seminary and I didn't know how well I was going to get to know you, if I was going to get to know you at all, because of the condition that you were facing. And of all the things that just grounded me was the joy that you expressed in having us visit you. And I think we prayed evening prayer together in that room with a bunch of other seminarians. And I just thought to myself, he didn't even want it to be about him when we went to visit. It's like, I want to pray with you. I want to chat with you. I want to see how you're all going. So it was very inspirational when we went. It was something special. And now to see you running circles around me in the gym and all sorts of things, it's a beautiful thing to see. Thanks be to God that the health is back.
Yeah, sometimes I think men in their midlife have heart attacks, and the weird result of that is they get fit for the first time in their life because the doctors tell them you get fit or you're dead. Well, I wasn't told that, but I had to learn through all the physio and occupational therapy that I had to do, and I've just kept it up ever since. I've been going to the gym ever since, and I don't see why I should stop. It has to be good for me.
His willpower is so much better than mine. Whenever the dessert comes out, I'm all about it, and he just watches us eat dessert. The willpower's there.
That's awesome. Your Grace, just speaking about the spiritual life, there are many young people who find themselves really drawn to the timeless traditions of the church, and I just wanted to ask how might the Catholic Church in Sydney address their needs, particularly when there's a vocal minority who would rather a more liberal progressive church, especially, and I ask this especially with regards to the liturgy and also some aspects of morality.
Okay. Look, I think in Sydney, people meet a pretty straight up and down church. So I know that there are bishops in other parts of the country that joke about the Sydney rite, by which they mean that it's done strictly by the book and very reverent and solemn and beautiful. And I won't pretend that's how you get it everywhere you go. And probably part of the cleverness of the church that Christ founded is you get a bit of variety people get to choose. If one place doesn't work for them and they're not finding prayerful, there'll be another place with a different style that they can choose. But in general in Sydney, and certainly you go to Mass in my cathedral, and if you love tradition and beauty and the treasures of the church over 2,000 years, where you see them all on absolutely full display at a solemn mass on Sunday at the cathedral, which Father Ben is in charge of orchestrating now. And the standard hasn't completely collapsed since he got there.
Good to hear.
In fact, he's doing pretty well.
Thank God.
We also have the great plus in Sydney that we have many rites, not just my Latin rite, but we're blessed with many of the Eastern rites of the church, and they're, again, on average, it's not always of equal standard, but on average, a love for the tradition, the beauty and the treasury of the church's devotions are on display, and you can find those in Sydney, and you can find there are quirky little corners where you can find the Dominican rite still alive and well in Sydney, or the extraordinary form of the Latin rite, and beyond that, in the rest of the church, there are other rites too. There are 24 of them, and even subdivisions within those. There's within the Latin rite, there's the Anglo-Catholics, there's the Dominican rite, there's Benedictine rites, there's the rite of Ambrose of Milan, there's the rite of Toledo, and so on. So there is a real richness for people that are looking for the tradition available, much of that available in Sydney for people. And I think we could always be doing better. So I think in some places the music is, well, it's not everything it could be. Look, yesterday I went to a mass with the Samoans and the singing was just glorious, and they love to sing, and I wish they could teach every Aussie to sing. But even when we're singing flat, they seem to be able to harmonise around it and make it sound better. Well, I think we could lift our act in our music in a lot of our parishes, and probably our preaching could be better in some instances, or our sense of welcome, or our sense of reverence. So I think while in general the liturgical life in Sydney is probably pretty good, we could always be doing better, and we should be, because it's the most important thing we do in our lives is worshipping God. So we should give him our best. Now, you think of what the energy we put into a Taylor Swift concert. Well, we should put every bit as much artistic creativity. I don't know quite if you'd want to use quite as much technology, but you want to use all the gifts God's given us for the most important thing, which is for our worship. So we should be determined to make our worship even more worthy and welcoming and beautiful. And that will speak to a lot of your young adults who I think find that very attractive. But there'll be other places where people are looking for just a tight-knit sense of community, or for people that think some of the things they think, and they'll find another place somewhere in Sydney, I would think, for them too. In terms of those that want to fiddle with our morality to make it more fashionable, more in keeping with the thinking of this world, well, look at this world. Is the morality of this world making anybody happy? Now, we've got the worst rates we've ever had of depression, of family breakdown, of young adults just not committing ever to anybody, of people feeling kind of lost and spiritually dry, and then going through drugs or going through gambling or just anything to try and make themselves get at least a temporary buzz in their lives. But the morality of this world is not going to make you happy. And so far from saying we should modify what we do in order to go with the flow of the current culture, I think we have to be with great love and humility, critics of that culture, which is not helping people to thrive, and offering them a much more ancient but more beautiful and ultimately divine wisdom about what will make people flourish, what will make them fulfilled. And that is the law of God. That is the morality that has been handed down to us through the generations from the apostles. Okay, it's not always easy to live. No, the church has its eyes wide open to everybody, no matter where they're coming from, what mess they've been through or are still in the middle of, or no matter what their attractions are or their distractions are or whatever else has happened in their lives or is going on right now. Church's arms are wide open. Come in. But when you come in, the church is going to set the bar quite high for you. It wants the best for you, so it's going to ask a certain heroism of you. It's going to give you the wherewithal to be a hero through the grace of the sacraments and the Word of God, support of the community. But once you're there, day by day, you'll be called to more and better. And I think that's what the morality of the church is offering people. It's more and better. And I don't pretend it's always easy. It's not always easy for me. But you give it your best shot, God will give you the grace.
And just as I guess one of the many sheep in the church, I just want to say thank you, because you have been such a vocal, I guess, critic of the world, of the world's morality, I guess. And that's really, I guess, encouraged me to do the same. So thank you from sheep to shepherd, I guess.
Thank you.
And we did touch on, through obedience and things, the priesthood. And I think now we can recognize that it's not solely on the shoulders of the clergy and all religious to carry out some of the key functions in building up the church. So we obviously have a great need for lay leadership. So how important is lay leadership, especially in terms of things like Catholic education, healthcare, the care services, professions such as law, journalism and the like? And what qualities make a good Catholic lay leader?
Okay. I'm hoping very soon to hear the news that Sydney will be granted an International Eucharistic Congress in 2028. That's my great hope. It will be 100 years since the last time there was one in Sydney, 20 years since our World Youth Day. It will be a great time to recover some of the energy of those things and bring the gifts and the needs of our generation to that time. And one of the things that will feature at the Congress for sure is that for 30 years there were no priests in Australia. For 30 years, lay people led the church and kept the flame of faith alive. They taught their children their catechism. They prayed the rosary with them. They kept the faith alive. Very occasionally, they got a mass because there was a chaplain on a French boat or a Spanish boat coming through, and they were occasionally permitted to go to the boat and attend mass. And very briefly, one of the convict priests was allowed to say mass. And another time, a kind of renegade priest passed through and he left the Eucharist in a pyx, and the lay people prayed with that pyx at what is now the St Patrick's Church Hill Church, the site there. Lay people kept our church alive for 30 years. And no one would pretend it was ideal circumstances. You know, they craved the Eucharist. They kept petitioning the governor. They had to have a priest, even though they weren't legal in Britain yet, even though the Mass was still illegal in the British Empire. And eventually they got their way. They pushed so hard that the Protestant establishment decided to let them have a priest and let them have their masses, their sacraments. But still, a huge burden of the faith had to be, passing on the faith and leading in the faith had to be on the lay people, because 2 priests for the whole continent of Australia was not going to take you very far. And it was years before we had remotely enough priests for the task to be done. And so we've always had a lay leadership and energy in the church in Australia. And you look back through the years, you know, who ran the St Vincent de Paul Society and a lot of the charitable works of the church? Who ran our schools? It was mostly nuns and brothers to start with, and then it's been lay people ever since. Who set up our hospital systems? Well, even if they're set up by nuns, most of the people working in them were lay people from the beginning, and more so as time went on. But even more importantly, the biggest group of leaders in our church are parents. And they're pretty well all lay people. There might be a few priests in some of the Oriental rites who are priests as well as parents. But basically our parents are lay people. And they're the ones who pass on the faith to the next generation or not. They decide whether there's going to be another generation of the faithful or not. They have a huge role in passing on the faith, in developing the character of their children. And we need to be very conscious of the greatest lay vocation of all is to be spouse and parent, and never to buy into the attitude of this world that's not a serious vocation. You've got to get out there and get a professional job as well, because that's a serious vocation. This is actually the most precious thing that a layperson does, and a very great gift to their family and to the world. Now then, lay people also have professions. They have trades, they have jobs where they can often get to places that the priests could never get. The influence they have on their colleagues at work, on their friends at the pub or at the football game or the Mothers Club or wherever they are, the influence they can have on those other people. There's no priest going to get into those worlds. We need our lay people to be very conscious that some of them have real gifts of leadership, and all of them have a baptismal calling to be passing on the faith, to be evangelists. Whether it's in the little world of their own family or their classroom or their workplace, or whether it's in a bigger world by being a really good Catholic politician or lawyer or union leader or whatever. And so the church is calling on its lay people perhaps more than ever before. Partly that might be in some places because of not having enough priests. But even if we had oodles of priests, I'd be saying most of those jobs are priests no good at. We need lay people to be the ones giving the lead and doing the work in those places.
Thank you. And when it comes to Catholic schools, some teachers often find themselves in the classroom deviating from syllabus outcomes and addressing questions that are fundamental to a non-Catholic or Catholic student's understanding of the faith, of the Catholic faith. What are your thoughts on a holistic syllabus revision that helps form a student in the Catholic faith as if starting from the beginning?
That question came from the teacher, obviously.
Okay, I better watch you and see if you're nodding or shaking your head. Well, we went through a pretty major root and branch, complete revision of the syllabus for religious education in dioceses like Sydney and Melbourne some years back. That was under Cardinal Pell. There was a view that it was not serious, academically serious. It wasn't religiously serious, what we had before. At least we could do better. And so a lot of work was put into that, to know, worship and love, syllabus and all the texts that go with it, including the text for the parents and for the teachers and for the students, so that everyone could play their part in this. And those have been constantly revised ever since. And there's still big criticisms people have and improvements they make in areas they think are left out or not given enough attention. In the end, there's only so much the best teacher in the world can do with 3 or 4 hours a week. particularly if they're not getting backed up at home, in the extended family. They're not getting backed up in the parish because the family aren't going to the parish. It's a lot to put on one teacher for 3 or 4 hours a week. And I think a big thing we have to rethink is, shouldn't the whole of the school experience be evangelising and catechising? Shouldn't we use the texts we choose for English, or the history we teach, or the way we teach science, or music? Because frankly, all those things are a big part of what passes on the faith. Sacred music passes on the faith. Sacred art passes on the faith. Reading great literature, often written by people of faith, raises big questions for a young mind that it's great to raise with them. It's the study of history and where has the church been and people of faith been at different times. But even more broadly, the power of ideas and of heroic individuals and of great movements in history to affect the future, because we see how it's done so in the past. In other words, we can use the whole curriculum at school, not just the RE part, to serve the project of a Catholic education. Now, I'm not saying, and therefore we dump modern science and just teach creation science like some American schools might want to do. I'm not suggesting that for a moment. But can't a physics teacher, looking at a spiral galaxy or looking at the spiral in a seashell, say, wow, what was God thinking when he made that? And just gently be raising questions in the students' minds. Hey, science and religion aren't opposed. They actually feed each other in all sorts of very creative, important ways. They intersect at so many points. I think we could use the whole of the school experience to be feeding our faith. On this show, you talk sometimes about the good things sports can do for people. Well, and Catholic schools are great at sports. I was celebrating the 8 Olympians from Sydney Catholic schools. I'm sorry to be beaten by Brisbane. I heard had 12 from Brisbane Catholic schools. There was one school in Bunbury that had 4 from the one school. It's great. We're very proud of it. But sport isn't just about the medals. We know it's about things like personal excellence and all that's required for that by way of commitment, perseverance, but also about teams, about learning to share your excellence and back each other up and work for a goal together. And I think there are all sorts of aspects of character that sport can teach, and that when it's taught well, just like the rest of the curriculum at school. So I would love to see a pretty major rethink of the way we do all of education, not just the RE bit. The RE bit could always be better too, but I think there's a lot more that we could be offering. We offer our school masses and retreats and some of those things outside the RE class. They're very enriching. They could be better too. But in the end, if we could make every hour that the kids are at school serve the purpose of making them the disciples and the Christian leaders for the future that we need, that would be a great plus.
And on the topic of Catholic schools, there are various attempts by some to curtail what we can and cannot teach in Catholic schools, and also who we might employ in our schools. So what do you think can be done in this space so that we can practice and teach the faith authentically?
I think it's absolutely essential that the church, all the members of the church, and the parents who have kids in Catholic schools or who have had kids in Catholic schools, and they're not all Catholics, they're not all the church, except in a very vague sense, but they liked the church enough, they were comfortable enough with the church, they entrusted their children to us. We need all those citizens being very clear to our political masters that that we will not have a situation where others are dictating what we teach in RE class or who our teachers will be. We have to be free to make choices along the lines of whether someone is a good fit for a Catholic school. That is, whether they are comfortable with, give witness in their own life to a Catholic ethos, a Catholic understanding of the human person, of morality, of the doctrines of the faith and the rest. And, we won't always find people that are absolutely hot for Jesus. I wish I could find many more of those and put them right up, on track to being principals as soon as possible. But there'll be others who'll be kind of fellow travellers with us who bring other gifts and are willing at least to serve that mission and give testimony, witness to that mission themselves. But if you actually think most of the Catholic thing's wrong, if you think that the morality is all screwed up and you just want to be like a proper modern person, or you don't like the sacraments and the worship that goes on, well, Catholic schools are not the place for you as a teacher. You could be a great teacher somewhere else, but you're a bad fit. If you think the whole thing is all false, and in a sense you're living a lie, going there as a teacher and having to teach different things of the church that you don't believe in, or else doing it in a kind of undermining way, then you're not being true to yourself. And I'd be saying, find a better place to teach. Let us find the best fit we can for that job. And our political masters and the culture around us has to give us the freedom to do that. Now, hey, they do that everywhere else. I mean, if you're a rugby league player and you say, well, actually, I think soccer is much better and I'm just going to kick the ball along the ground, I'm never going to kick it up in the air and I'm never going to pass it to somebody. I'm certainly never going to touch it with my hands. Well, that's fine, but you're not going to last long in a rugby league team if that's your view of what football should be. If you want to be an official in the Labor Party, but actually you hate Labor ideals and you're secretly totally with the libs on everything, well, you're not going to have a job as an official in the Labor Party. Why should it be different for our Catholic schools? We should have the space to do our Catholic thing in our Catholic schools. And I'd say the same for the Islamic schools and the Jewish schools and the Protestant schools and so on. Give them the space to do their thing. Parents will decide where they want their child to be educated, and it's part of the richness of Australia that parents do have that choice. So parents and rest of the Catholic community, you've got to be active telling your political masters, don't you touch our freedom in this area. Give us more freedom, that's fine, we'll clap you, but don't you be trying to restrict it further. It's already hard enough.
Amen.
Your Grace, do you find that freedom more under attack currently with the I wouldn't know the name of it or anything. There's that bill.
The Equality Bill before the New South Wales Parliament.
Yeah. It's that simple. Okay, the Equality Bill, yeah.
Yep.
Would you say that's most under attack?
Look, I have no doubt at all that religious freedom is much more under attack in the last 10, 20 years. And this reflects the secularisation of Australia. Now, for a long time, we probably rode on the back of the Anglicans, who were the establishment, and if they were going to get the freedom to have their schools, we would get the freedom to have our schools. And so we could rely on the establishment backing us. But now we're at a time where a lot of the elites, whether that's in government, in the courts, in the academies, in the media, they're very anti-church, and they would want to squeeze us, keep push us right out of the public square if they could. And so in all sorts of ways, we get every week there's another legal case somewhere, or someone losing their job, or someone being deplatformed or whatever because of their religious views, which would not have happened 20 years ago. And so I think we shouldn't be paranoid about this. There aren't kind of anti-Catholics, anti-Christians, anti-religious under every bed, behind every wall. No, Australia's still a mostly pretty tolerant society, and we should be proud of that. But we are at risk of a growing intolerance in this area and some other areas, and so we've got to be vigilant about that and pushing back where we can. I would hope the Equality Bill is going to fail. It's just not going to get up. It's not going to get the time or the votes. But that's only going to be because a lot of people have worked for that to happen. So we resist where we can. And I think in the meantime, all the time, we need to be presenting a positive case for religious freedom. Not just resisting when people are encroaching on it, but all the time reminding people why this is such a benefit for society. All the good things that people of faith do for a society. All the social infrastructure that the churches have built for this land. The fact that giving each other space to believe different things actually means we live better beside each other and are better neighbours. Whereas if we try and force everyone into the one formula, whatever it is, you end up with a lot of angry people and you end up with wars and all sorts of troubles. So we have to propose anew to our culture why religious freedom is a positive good, not just a bit of territory we're defending for ourselves, but it's actually good for everyone. It's good for the atheists, that they're not forced to be believers, and that they can go to a Catholic hospital when they have a heart attack too, because religion is there and the freedom to have the hospital is there.
Thank you. And we'll shift over now from schools and organisations to the home. And in today's fast-paced world, especially in Sydney, many parents and particularly fathers struggle to balance their responsibility at work with their duties at home and their spiritual life. What advice would you give to parents who want to ensure faith remains at the centre of their own life and their family life?
Mother Teresa was once approached by a priest who was a kind of very senior priest in the bureaucracy of the church, who explained to her that he had very grave responsibilities. He was terribly busy, and that as a result, he was finding it very hard to do an hour of prayer each day, a holy hour, as she recommended that they should all do. And she said, "Oh yes, I can see it's terrible. You've got such grave responsibilities, so many things you've got to do. You need 2 hours of prayer every day." And okay, she was being a bit provocative, but she was right, of course. If you've got big responsibilities and a lot of calls on your time, you don't do less praying. You've got to do more praying. You've got to be more intentional about it. Because otherwise you're doing all sorts of activity, possibly very, very well, but it's to the wrong end. And it's not actually building up the kingdom of God, it's building up something else. So I'd say to busy parents and workers and professionals, you've got to be very intentional about this. This is as important as talking to your wife and kids or your husband and kids. You don't say, "I'm too busy for them. I'm going to focus on my job." Well, you can do that. Some men do, some women do. The family falls apart. Relationship's dead. No, you've got to be very intentional. I'm going to give this number of hours every day of my life, every week of my life, month, year of my life to my wife, to my children, because that's what all the rest of it's really for. I'd be saying the same thing with God. Relationship with God requires some time, some conversation. You don't just say, oh, I'm too busy for that, I'll come back to it later. In the meantime, you kind of forget God, or you become your own God. So this requires intentionality. It requires discipline. People might imagine that, we priests, we've got the ideal spiritual life. We've got a life where prayers are structured into all the time. So, those priests, what are they doing? They're just in their monasteries chanting in Latin day and night. Well, no, we're just as easily distracted by Netflix or the entertainments of this world or the busyness of our work. And there's a risk for us that we don't pray or don't pray enough or at the best times. And so I say to my priests and I say to my lay people, no, you've got to be very disciplined and structure this into your life for every day, every week, every year. You've got to have times set aside for God like you have times set aside for your family. And okay, there's a sense in which it's all for your family and there's a sense in which it's all for God. And that's true. It's true that you can make your work a prayer. You can stop. I've tried to get all of Sydney to stop and say the Angelus in the middle of the day. Just give a tiny 1 minute a day to just stop and say, ask what's it all for and where's God in this, and ask God to be part of this. Well, you could do that lots of times a day. Just stop very briefly and reflect and call God and make the work a prayer. And the same when you're changing the nappy on a screaming baby in the middle of the night. And again, don't romanticise this. No one can pretend that feels good. You're exhausted. But hey, it actually is an act of love, of very practical, hard loving, and a parent should turn that into a prayer. They should at that moment pray for that kid as they're changing the nappy, or for themselves, that they'll be a less exhausted and more patient parent or whatever. But so it doesn't just have to be the official prayer times we set aside each day, either for ourselves and God, or each week or each year, but also through the busyness of every day and every night, turning that into times of prayer too. So if you can't fit in an hour, you've got to fit in 2.
Amen.
Grace, I was wondering if you could give a word of encouragement to a lot of our young families. Some of our parents are sometimes put off by the embarrassment that they feel Sunday mass attendance. Their kids are making noise, they're running around, their people turn around in the pews and give them a bit of a look, like control your kids, all that kind of thing. Do you care about any of that stuff?
Yeah, I do. I want more of it.
You heard it here.
Look, the church is messy. People wander around and they go and light candles while somebody else is singing, while somebody else is over there saying the rosary. And it's not all neat and orderly. It doesn't have to be. It never was. And if a kid cries, and if they've kind of determined because they've just discovered acoustics and they realise that their voice can now be heard by all the world, there might be a time when you have to take them out because otherwise your own ears are going to ache as well as those around you. And I get that, that's fine. But I want those kids at Mass. They've got to be comfortable in church. They've got to know how to behave in church and learn to face God and the sacred mysteries and so on. Well, that's not going to happen. It's just a theory. They've got to grow up in that. And I love the sound of new life around me at Mass. I'm so pleased when I go out to the western suburbs and I've got lots of children at Mass and families at Mass. Sometimes when I go to the eastern suburbs, I feel like have I come to a nursing home? No, they're not all like that by any means, but that's how Mass should be. You should be struggling to get a seat because there's so many people there loving God and doing their best by their families and their work and the rest of the things in their life, and the children are part of that. And their own way, they haven't learned yet how to sing badly like most Australians. All they know how to do is scream at this stage. So, well, okay, they'll scream. That'll be their way of worshipping God. And, great saints. So Francis Assisi told us that the birds, when they're singing, they're actually singing hymns. They're praising God in their own birdie way. Well, who knows what's going on in the heart of a little one at Mass when they're making a lot of noise, but they may be in their own way speaking to God and God speaking to them. So don't interrupt that. Don't be saying, oh, it's disorderly. Let's make it tidy. And as I say, if they put the screaming match on because they really want to embarrass mum and dad, they've just discovered this is power. Well, okay, sometimes you've got to take them outside for a bit and calm them down. But certainly bring them to Mass. Do not be embarrassed. If some old lady looks at you with a scowl and makes you feel embarrassed, you tell her the Archbishop of Sydney told you to bring your child today.
Heard it here first, and we'll see you all at Sunday Mass. Get to Mass.
Amen. Your Grace, you've touched a few times on sport, very much keeping to the theme of this podcast, so we appreciate it. And we began with such a rich reflection on your own sporting achievements. So, in keeping to that theme, what do you think the role is of sport in shaping values and a strong work ethic within society? And how can these principles be integrated into the life of the church to foster a deeper sense of community and spiritual growth?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I think when the Olympic movement started, the founders of the Olympic movement saw it as being about character and about building friendships between people of very different backgrounds. And these are beautiful things that sport can do for us. It doesn't always. Sport can be done very selfishly and with great aggression towards the other. And I don't just mean that the aggression played out in the sport, but a kind of hate towards the rival. And so it doesn't always build up our character as it should. It can be ideologised. Look at the moment, the way the trans fashion in our culture is, they're using sport to push that again and again and again. Or at other times, other sort of political, cultural issues that people use sport to promote. So it's not that intrinsically and always it's going to build better character, better ideals and better cooperation between people, but it can, and it can be a real glue for people. You look at the loyalty that guys or girls on a team can have towards each other, and the way you learn to back each other up and to fill in for each other's deficits and to delight in each other's gifts. And this is exactly how a community should be and how the church should be and how society should be. You look at the ways it teaches you certain important virtues like courage and perseverance, patience. Other things can teach you those things too, but we know sport is a powerful way of teaching these things. And I think especially for young people who today may not be getting a lot of those values in the other places they should be getting them, there's a sense in which it's more important than ever for sport to be promoting those good values, because they probably should be getting them playground, they should be getting them on the internet, they should be getting them at home, whatever, but they might not. So if sport can be a bit of remedial moral education for people, then it's got a real role today that it didn't always have in the same way. And I say all that again without romanticising it, because there'll still be some people that play sport and still be selfish and it it just doesn't seem to affect them on a deeper level. But I think it can, and I think it's worth our trying to turn sport to those good ends. Catholic schools have always been serious about sport, interestingly. They were historically, a lot of parents entrusted their kids to us because we were good at rugby league or because we had piano lessons. We had some of those extras that they wouldn't get at the other schools. Now, once they're in the family, they then discovered we had a lot of other riches to offer, like the Catholic faith and worship and other things. But the thing that initially attracted them was they knew their boy was sporty, they knew their girl was musical, or vice versa. Their boy was musical, their girl was sporty. They thought at Catholic school. Going back to an earlier point I made, if we can turn all those things to the good, to being really good for people's formation, and sport can be that for the community. I remember a guy, for some years I lived in Melbourne, and I was pressed, what AFL team did I support? And I didn't know the first thing about AFL. I was from Sydney. What would I know about AFL? In those days, there were no AFL teams in Sydney, let alone 2 AFL teams in Sydney. It was unheard of north of the border, really. And then a guy, Steve Lawrence was his name, started coming to Mass in my parish. I got to know him and know his brother David, and he turned out he was part of the Emmanuel movement, and he was doing very well in his sport, played for Hawthorn, doing really well in his sport, but he was also really good in his faith. And so I would tell people I supported Hawthorn because they had Steve Lawrence. Now, if they'd asked me the name of a single other player, I couldn't have told them, but I knew one. And the year I was ordained a priest, I was sent overseas, sent to Oxford to study to do a doctorate, and Hawthorn won that year. And Steve Lawrence brought his whole team to see me at the Priory in Oxford. And they came in, we were at lunch at the time, Friars, and these giants arrived that were basically up to the ceiling. 18 of them or something came into the room, up to the ceiling, and people just, mouths wide open. I said, most Australians are like that. Now Steve is an example. He's been very intentional about using sport to teach people about character and about leadership and about the Christian life. And so that can be done.
We had Steve Lawrence on the show, and an amazing testimony. Now, you may have found it difficult to pick an AFL team, but we know which rugby league team you go for. We're going to give you dinner after this, so be careful with your response.
Oh, boy. I don't even know what the correct answer is. But when I was Bishop of Parramatta, it was probably fairly straightforward, but it helped that I was elected as a patron of Parramatta Leagues Club straight away. And when I was made Archbishop of Sydney, there was a real issue because Sydney has whatever it has, 6 teams or whatever of its own, just within the territory of the Archdiocese. So the Canterbury Bulldogs cleverly got in first with electing me as a patron like the first day after the announcement, and before I'd even been installed as Archbishop. So I've been a member of Canterbury ever since.
There you go.
That's great to hear.
Someone fix him a dinner plate. You can eat tonight.
So unfortunately, unlike many places in the world, we get to the fortunate part, which is that the priesthood in Sydney is on average getting younger each year. What would you attribute this to?
Look, I'd say there are 3 big factors here. The first one is God. God wants priests for the people of God because they do such precious things for them. So people of God pray for priests. They ask God for priests. He will send them priests. And I think in Sydney there is a good vocational culture where people actually ask God for priests and he hears them and he gives them priests. So it's not rocket science, pretty straightforward. Ask, you'll get them. You might have to keep asking, like the importunate widow banging on the judge's door, but eventually you'll get them. The second thing that I think has been a huge factor was Cardinal George Pell. Cardinal Pell, wherever he went, vocations went up. And they went up because he talked up the priesthood. Again, it's not rocket science. He just said, we need priests. Priests are good. It's a great life. They do great things for people. Think about it. You could be a priest. And some guys thought about it and they did become priests. And they wanted to be part of his spiritual army. And so I think that the priesthood went up pretty quickly in Sydney. The numbers entering the seminary when Cardinal Pell came is it's about his personality, his doctrine, his character. And the third thing was World Youth Day. World Youth Day was such a gift to this country on so many levels, and one of them is that nearly every priest that was ordained in the subsequent 15 years, World Youth Day is somewhere in their story, either our one in Sydney or some subsequent World Youth Day, because they were only in primary school when our one in Sydney happened. But again, what was the power of the youth of the world gathering here for prayer and catechesis that it brought young people to consider their vocations? And I think a lot of good marriages came out of this too, and other parts of the Christian vocation came out of World Youth Day. And I think it was that World Youth Day normalised faith. The streets were full of faith and the joy of faith. It wasn't a funny, dirty little secret that we keep at home very privately. It was out there for everyone to see and to celebrate. And I think it said to that generation, be proud to be Catholic. Enjoy being a Catholic, and get out there and serve the building up of the church as the Pope called us to do. And lots of vocations followed. And Sydney probably got more than their share because we were the hosts. So, no, it was ground zero for that spiritual atom bomb that came for Australia. So that's three things anyway. But whatever the reason, I don't take it for granted. It's fragile. It's not inevitable. That Sydney's vocations have been a continuing stream and sufficient to mean the average age of our priests is getting younger when in almost all the rest of the Western world they're getting older. That's such a gift to us. It means we've got young guys like Father Ben here that can do things like podcasts, which your average 70-year-old priest doesn't know a lot about podcasts. You can evangelise the next generation because you understand them better. Well, if you're in a diocese where the youngest priest is 65, how well is he going to be talking to 20-year-olds? Now, okay, some 65-year-olds are great with young people. They're great with young adults. So, we shouldn't be ageist about this, but it helps that you've got a good group of young priests because they will know something about today's world, something more about the techniques that could be used to speak to that world, and they give the rest of us older guys hope because we can look over our shoulders and there's someone behind us. In fact, there's a whole army behind us. And I must say, for me as Archbishop, that's very encouraging. But I also see the look on my people's faces when you have a huge procession of priests at an ordination or the Chrism Mass or something, a huge procession of priests, and they're not all just about to die either. Like you might see in some places, they're full of life. And my people love it. The joy on their face at seeing, because the future of the church is in good hands.
As much as we look in a spirit of thanksgiving to what we have in Sydney, I hope I'm not going to embarrass you now, but it needs to be said that attitude reflects leadership. And without your support and without the initiatives that you support, it's difficult to keep going because we're in a cultural battle. So you were being very humble when you gave us those three, but I want to add a number 4, and that is we've got a good leader here in the Archdiocese who actually supports initiatives like this, like a podcast. sees young people, not just priests, doing good things and encourages them, doesn't discourage, doesn't say, oh, you guys are going backwards, doesn't, criticize. If you've got the energy, go and do it. And it's all done in a good spirit. So I thought I'd just add that fourth point for what it's worth.
Thanks be to God.
Thank you.
And Your Grace, you more than anyone would have eyes and ears across all that's happening in the Catholic Church in Sydney. Are there any areas of concern for you? And conversely, are there any victories and feel-good stories that you want to share with us?
Okay. Well, there's areas of concern, absolutely. Only 1 in 6, 1 in 7, 1 in 8 Catholics is at Mass on Sunday. That might be twice as good as in many parts of Australia, but hey, don't be skiting about that. It's shameful that where are the other 7 out of 8? And okay, they may be finding their way to God in some other way. I hope they are, but there's such a risk that you just fall out of contact with your faith tradition, with what the Word of God is speaking to you each week, with the huge gift that are the sacraments and the community of the church do. So I'm alarmed at the decline of practice in Australia, and we might be well ahead of most of Europe today, but we're well behind America, for instance. So it's not just, that's the Western world, it's doomed spiritually. It doesn't have to be like this. We have pockets because, some areas we have a lot of Maronites, or we have a lot of Vietnamese, or we have a lot of Filipinos, and so there'll be parts of Sydney where you can be up to 50% of Catholics are practising. But it's not what it should be. And I think we have to be much more conscious of the role of every one of us getting people into the church and then to church. It's something we all can do. Just the simple thing of inviting someone. How many people tell me that when they invited someone to Mass, the person said, oh, okay, I'll give that a go. I'll try. They know it's not a commitment. They go once, they don't like it, they don't have to come back. But no one's ever asked them before, even though they're baptised. No one in their family ever did it. So it could be too bringing people into the church as well as to church. Somebody who's not a Catholic, maybe never baptised, all they're waiting for was for someone to invite them. And if someone does, and it changes their whole life. So we do have to be a much more intentional and invitational church here in Sydney, and not get smug about the fact that, okay, we're doing better than most, or we've got a lot of great activities happening, we've got a lot of gifts here in Sydney that would be the envy of many other parts of the church. We're still called to more and better, just as I was saying before, individuals are called in their moral lives to more and better. Well, as a whole church here in Sydney, we're called to more and better too. Behind the people not coming to Mass, there's an even scarier thing for me, and that's the eclipse of faith, that people are actually growing up immunised to faith. Various aspects of the culture is making them resistant to faith. So that even if they hear a good preacher, a good evangelist, a good podcast, whatever, it doesn't work because there's this wall. And I think we've got to be really thinking hard about how we break down those walls, how we get through the little cracks. People, so often it's probably at a time of crisis or a big time of change or whatever in their life, but sometimes they're a bit more open than other times, and if we're there for them, we could bring them to faith too. Upsides, look, Sydney has so many gifts. We are a multicultural centre of the world, and that means all these different groups bring their devotions and faith life traditions to our church in Sydney, and you see that playing out in all sorts of good ways. And it's a beautiful thing. And you say, well, what would be the thing that would most help the Latin Western Church here in Sydney in the years ahead? I'd say send more Orientals to Australia because they bring such energy, excitement for their faith, passion for their faith. But of course, I don't want to be poaching them from the Middle East where they are needed more than ever. So, and I certainly don't want them driven out of their homelands in order to come here. But I recently was visiting a Vietnamese parish, and it was astonishing that all their different groups, they had different prayer groups and social action groups, and they each had like 400 or 500 members in each group. And so some of our ethnic communities are a huge strength in Sydney. We have a great history of faith that we can be very proud of in this city, that Sydney is the most religious part of Australia, has been fairly consistently from the beginning of Australia and continues to be to this day. We've had the great gift of many religious and many priests, and still have perhaps more than our share. We have, I think, some wonderful things happening in the evangelisation field. Great speakers come, great events put on, some of our street marches and processions, and we're doing a lot of things that are an encouragement and help to deepen people's faith and devotional lives. So Sydney has real strengths in the spiritual area, even if we've got some big challenges too.
Did our baptism boom make international news recently?
It did indeed. Even in Italy, they were astonished, because I think the Italians think places like Australia, they're all atheists. and so they were agog. And it made news around the world that we had so many coming for adults. This was coming for baptism at Easter. Now, to be a bit humble about this, there were American dioceses that did much better, but they don't seem to get the same attention for whatever reason, and there'd be other places too. So France had a very strange doubling or tripling of the number that they had before COVID of coming into the church at Easter. So something's happening in the Western world at the moment. It's interesting to reflect on whether it's just that we're getting over COVID and people are a bit freer, or whether there's dissatisfaction with what the world is offering. Whatever it is, we had great numbers coming to the church, and I love every one of them. And again, arms of the church wide open, every one of them. But I'd like that to be happening everywhere, not just in Sydney.
Thanks be to God. And considering all of this, what are your hopes for the people of God in Sydney as we navigate uncertain terrain with government and culture?
Look, I'm very humble and realistic about my hopes. I just want, there's about 5 million people in Sydney now, 5 to 6 million, Greater Sydney. I want 5 to 6 million saints.
Amen.
Amen.
I think if we really were doing all the things we've been talking about today, there'd be a lot more, and then they'd be helping to make more. So 5 to 6 million saints, that's my hope for Sydney.
If not holiness, what else? If not holiness, what else? Exactly.
Yep.
Amen to that.
I love it.
Now, before we conclude the show, Your Grace, we have an Against the Grain canvas that we'd like you to sign. It's been part of our... you can stay there and Anthony will bring it over to you. There's your Sharpie. Your signature and a saying or a Bible verse, something that you'd like to leave us with. There it is. Speaking the truth in love. from Ephesians, Archbishop Anthony Fisher. That sounds like a motto to me.
Sounds like a motto.
Sounds like a motto. Beautiful. Your Grace, you have a very busy schedule and you've got a million caps that you wear. You didn't need to do a humble little podcast in the western suburbs this afternoon, but you did. And so we thank you for that. And I hope that our audience have been able to see who you are as a person, what your hopes are for the Archdiocese of Sydney. And we just want to say thank you for being the leader that you are, doing what you do and supporting us in the way that you do. And we know that it can't be an easy job, so please be assured of our prayers for you as you continue on. And again, we thank you for your leadership and the generosity that you show, not just us here on this podcast, but the people of God. I'm so glad all those years ago you said yes to that appointment. You didn't add any resistance. And so, again, we thank you for your time here today.
Well, thank you, Father Ben and Anthony and the team. I'm delighted we're doing things like this. I believe that you're up there with the top 25 podcasts in Australia, or religious podcasts in Australia at the moment.
Occasionally on Spotify, we get that. Yeah, we do.
Well, I'm very proud of you, and that's wonderful to hear, and tribute to what you're offering, but also that you've got a loyal following of people that are enjoying and being enriched by what you do here. But to all of you that are watching or listening to this show, God bless you. God has great things in store for you. He wants you to be a hero. He wants you to be a saint, as does the Archbishop of Sydney. So get on with it. God bless you.
Amen. Amen. And to conclude the show, Your Grace, can you give us all a blessing?
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
Almighty God bless you and keep you all your days, Father, Son and Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Our Lord Jesus Christ says, you are the salt of the earth. What good is salt if it loses its taste? So everyone at home, stay salty.
And don't be afraid to go against the grain. God bless.
See you next time.